G'day, this is Jim with Sufficiency, and welcome to the second video in soft plastic lure making. In this video we're going to go to the next step after creating your master sculpt of the lure you want to create. If you haven't seen the first video, I recommend going and having a quick look at that. The video is quite long, but it's very detailed on how to actually make your master sculpt. The next step in the process, however, is actually making your mould that you use to pour the soft plastic material into. And basically all we're doing is, after we've built the master, we need to get some RTV silicone, which looks a bit like this one here. And this particular type of mould making silicone is a two-part, where you have a catalyst that you put into here. Now this mixes at a 100:5 ratio, this particular one. It comes in a box. The other thing you're going to need is some cardboard or something like that. I actually used the box that it came in. The reason I'm using this is because it's nice and shiny, so I'm actually going to use this as the inside, and what this is used for is building up around the mould, and it creates the walls that we then pour the silicone into. One of the problems with that is that the seal to the tile needs to be quite good, otherwise it's going to pour out. So just some cheap modelling clay. I think this cost me about $2. What we use this for is just bridging around the outside where the cardboard's going to meet the tile, so we can create a seal. Now you're also going to need some digital scales. This is so that we can accurately measure out the silicone and the catalyst at that 100:5 ratio. And the best way to do that is by measuring on a digital scale. And then just a couple other things, some tape, some sort of mixing spatula, this is just a timber tongue depressor, a knife, and a bucket to mix your silicone and catalyst up in before we pour it into the mould. Alright, the first step is to make sure that you cut a really straight edge along the bottom of your cardboard. This is going to make sure that the cardboard seats flush against the tile to help with a good seal to eliminate any possibility for that silicone to run out when it's in its liquid state. Then you want to cut the cardboard to ensure that the height of your walls is going to extend well above the highest point of your master. When you pour the silicone in, you want to have it rise to around 1/2 inch at least above the highest point of your master. So you want to make sure your walls can factor that in, and you cut them high enough. From there you can fashion the walls to sit comfortably around your master, giving yourself around about 1 inch out from each edge. And once you've done that, you then go ahead and form a seal using the clay. The first step for me is to put some blobs on each of the corners to hold your walls in place, so you can then move on to the longer edges. I simply roll out enough of this clay so that I can push it into the corners along the lengths of the walls in one piece. I press down firmly while supporting the walls from the other side with my other hand, and force the clay down into the corners so that I form a really good seal, again so that we prevent any of that silicone from running out while it's still in its liquid form. The walls have a really good seal, so I'm pretty confident we're not going to have any leaking issues. The toughest part is now trying to figure out how much silicone and catalyst to use for your mould. The best way to do this is to work out how heavy the silicone is per cubic centimetre. I used an existing silicone mould that I could measure the outside dimensions to work out my volume, weighed it, and then worked out how many grams per cubic centimetre the silicone weighed. I then verified that by measuring the container that my silicone came in and worked out that volume, and also the weight being 1.05 kilos, I could work out that my calculations with using my existing mould were pretty much accurate. Then measuring the outside dimensions of the new mould and working out the volume, I could then use that data to extrapolate that out to give me the amount of silicone I would need for this mould. It turned out to be around 240 grams. So using my 100 to 5 ratios, I worked out my 100 parts for the silicone side would be 230 grams and the 5 parts for the catalyst would be 11.5 grams. That gives me a total volume of 241.5 grams. You have to make sure you stir this up very well, because if you don't get the catalyst through the entire of the silicone, when you pour it in and it sets up, you can have pockets of uncured silicone, which is wet and sticky and obviously doesn't work in the mold. So you want to make sure you give it a really good stir. When you pour it in, you want to pour straight into the corner, not over the master, so you can ensure that the natural flow of the silicone moving throughout the rest of the mold forms a good seal along the edges of your master. Go ahead and pour it all in, and hopefully you have your measurements and calculations correct to completely cover the master sculpt. Once I've poured all my silicone in, I then put it down on the table and allow it to cure for 24 hours. After 24 hours, the silicone mold has cured enough that it can be separated from the master. I just push down with my finger into the surface to make sure it's nice and firm and springy before going ahead with the next step. First of all, just got to remove all that clay that we used to form a good seal between the cardboard walls and the tile. And then we can move along to actually removing the walls. Here you can see why using a cardboard that has a nice shiny surface is so beneficial, in that it separates from the silicone mold very easily. Once you've removed the walls, the next step is to peel up the mold from the tile. Just being careful and methodical in this process is very important, as we don't want to pull the mold away too quickly and risk potentially damaging the mold in this process. You want to work around the circumference of the mould, carefully peeling up until you reveal the master underneath and gently pull it away, completely separating the mould. From here it's just a matter of cleaning up the edges of the mould. The exterior is more for aesthetics, however along the edges of the mould itself you want to clean these edges up as carefully as you can with either a razor blade or a small pair of scissors. Here you can see the walls are nice and straight and at right angles to the flat surface of the tail. This is what I mentioned formerly in the video, as to ensure that when you pour the liquid plastic into this mould, that it forms a good edge on the thinner part of the lure itself. Here is the completed mould. It is now ready to be used in making soft plastic lures. That will be in the next video in this series. I hope you enjoyed this video and you learned something, and if you've got any questions please put them in the comments below. Of course, if you like this video please thumbs up, and if you didn't like the video thumbs down and leave some constructive criticism. I have a lot of other videos that I'm sure you'd like, so if you like this one and want to see more please subscribe. And go and check out my other videos, and of course, if you've got a chance, please share the videos around. Thanks very much for watching, and until next time, take it easy.